Let's start with what arguably is the biggest story out of the continent today. As we've reported earlier, Egypt has witnessed countrywide protests since late last week, demanding that President Mohamed Morsi resigns and calls early elections. Now, analysts do fear that these demonstrations could strain an already anemic economy even further, to no one's benefit. CCTV's Yasser Hakim explains why.
Government offices and services remained open on Sunday despite the mass demonstrations, with most private businesses closed down in fear of violence.
Most trade and businesses went into a standstill, which had a mixed effect. The negative part is that it had stopped production and distribution of goods. Of course, this would raise prices. The positive part is that the pound is stable for a few days because there's no more demand on the dollar.
Other positive news came surprisingly from the stock market. Contrary to expectations, the market closed on a high, climbing to its highest level in 2 weeks.
Foreigners pushed indices up by 1.5% by buying the shares at a low price, knowing they can sell with a profit after the end of the protest. This is a sign of confidence in the Egyptian market.
The government announced that its institutions, services and banks will continue operating throughout the week. The government has also pledged to provide Egyptians with basic goods and services to cover any expected shortages from demonstrations.
Analysts say it is too early to assess the economic impact of these demonstrations, but the impact may be bigger if the opposition goes through with its plans for mass strikes and civil disobedience starting Wednesday. This is Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
We'll, of course, be exploring the developments in Egypt a little later on. Right now, though, on to East Africa. The East African Community, a five-nation trade bloc, expects to officially start the journey towards a common currency before the end of the year, where the Heads of State Summit plans to usher in that particular milestone. Now, the community marked the third year of the Common Market Protocol on Monday, the 1st of July. If fully implemented, the protocol will allow the free movement of goods, services and labour within the 5 countries that make up the EAC. That said, though, its implementation has run into several hurdles in the last couple of years, including delays in the harmonisation of various laws and regulations on the reduction of duty and the movement of labour, among other matters. As CCTV's Peter Okaba reports, however, that's not stopping the 5 countries in East Africa from racing ahead to a common currency.
The Common Market Protocol, which came into place on the 1st of July the year 2010, was preceded by a customs union. The Common Market meant that businessmen across the various East Africa Community countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda and Burundi, now had unrestricted access to a pooled market of 126 million people, having been restricted to small internal markets in various member countries previously. There, however, remains a lot to be done with the private sector in Kenya, noting that various hurdles still exist.
Some of the challenges that business still have under the pillar of the right of establishment include the requirement of work permits and payment for work payments of the same, recognition of qualification for professionals and obtaining licenses from professional bodies to practice and cumbersome local authorities' legal and administrative frameworks.
It is important, therefore, that all partner states reform their respective legislations to be in tandem with the Common Market Protocol. In addition, there is need to fast-track the harmonization of standards for most traded goods. While there are over 4,000 standards, only approximately 1,500 have been harmonized.
The advent of the Common Market Protocol required the elimination of various existing barriers to trade, including those physical, regulatory and administrative. Many such barriers are enshrined in obscure laws governing processes such as cross-border migration. Recently, both Kenya and Uganda have waived work permit fees for EAC citizens, while other members are working on eliminating theirs.
There is the issue of academic and professional qualifications. We need to be able to recognize others' qualifications. And for this, we agreed that professionals, the various professionals, sign mutual recognition agreements. And so far, Kenya, Uganda, we have signed 2 agreements, especially for accountants and auditors, and of course, architects.
One other contentious issue in the past has been the axle load policy, with Kenya having favoured the 48-ton limit for trucks, contrary to other states which had favoured 56 tons with a 7-axle configuration on trucks. The issue is now, however, at rest, with all countries harmonized to 56 tons and various road infrastructure being upgraded as a result.
Construction work is scheduled to commence on Wundanyi, Taveta, Arusha Road, which recently secured funding from the African Development Bank to the tune of 19.5 billion Kenya shillings. Construction work on the Kenyan side of the road will receive Kenya shillings 9.5 billion, while the United Republic of Tanzania will receive the other amount, which is Kenya shillings 10 billion.
In August of 2013, ministers from the region are expected to sign a protocol to mark the advent of the common currency for the region, as per the timetable for integration. A heads of state summit to ratify the decision is slated for November of 2013. This is the Nairobi-Mombasa Highway, part of the really busy northern corridor that connects the Kenyan coast to the East African hinterland. And as the vehicles speed along this really busy highway, moving goods and services within the EAC, the inexorable march towards further integration of the East Africa community continues. Peter Okamba, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, in a bid to improve the tracking and the speed of cargo shipment by rail, Rift Valley Railways, the operator of the Kenya-Uganda Railway, has launched a $9.3 million systems upgrade. Now, simply put, for that money, RVR will use GPS transceivers to control the movement of trains and cargo along the railway track from a central hub. The automated train warrant software allows pretty much anyone really at the main operations centre in Nairobi to determine the exact location of trains along the entire track. It will also replace the manual management of crossovers at railway stations with a satellite-based track switch manager, which will automate the movement of the trains as well. Communication with the trains will be through onboard computers installed in all locomotives, which will have remote speed controls. Those computers as well can send back information on the condition of locomotives and the track as well.
We bring a very new technology that we to control all our assets that we have in our company. So basically, we are installing in our locomotives onboard computer that is connected by GSM or satellite communication to connect all the trains that we have along the line and control and plan better the movement of the trains. And attaching the trains, we have all the wagons that we have in that train. So we can control not only the locomotive, but even the wagons that we have attached and improve our delivery process for our customer.
Now, let's get a little more insight into what's happening with the Rift Valley Railways. Brown Ondego is Executive Vice Chairman of that company. He joins us now live in studio. Mr. Ondego, thank you very much for your time this evening. Rift Valley Railways in a fairly interesting position here because Kenya has announced plans to raise about 20+ billion shillings through a consumption tax to build an entirely new standard gauge rail line from Mombasa all the way through to Uganda. Now, once complete, how will that rail line affect RVR's business?
Oh, thank you very much, Rama. Not really. It won't affect us because we have a 20-year concession. We have gone about 7 years into that concession, and it is a continuation. And in fact, when we did the deeds of amendment somewhere in 2010, the fact of the bringing in the standard gauge was recognized. And in recognizing that, we agreed a formula which allows RVR to continue with its business and to have an option to move to the standard gauge. Standard gauge is the way to go, of course. It's a question of the timing. Perhaps that's the only debate we can have. But long term, if you look at the meter gauge, many people have moved to the out of the meter gauge. But the meter gauge still operates and still can service the regions very well. So yeah, we have a formula that will move us into the standard gauge. So we'll continue with our business on the standard gauge. As among the other operators, because the standard gauge is envisaged to be an open access system. So it will not really affect our business. We'll just continue our business as it's usual. at the moment as we are continuing. We will continue to invest and we'll continue to improve as you've just seen.
Right, Mr. Ndege, let's talk about some hard numbers here. Cargo and passenger throughput between 2007 and 2011 have dropped by about 30.7% respectively. So given the developments, especially with the standard gauge rail, plus the fact that your market share on cargo throughput has declined, how will RVR become profitable by 2015?
One needs to look to put it in context and look at the amount of investment that was required. Prior to the concessioning, maybe for about 2 decades, no investment had gone in the permanent way, no investment had gone into the rolling stock, no investment had gone into even the technological improvements that you've seen with the ATW, the automatic warrant system software that we have recently installed. So the line was in very bad shape. We didn't get our first disbursement until 29th of July 2011 is when we started going out to the market to buy spare parts for locomotives, wagons. Lucky enough, we could get some locally. And then we had the issue of locomotives. We did find that these locomotives, most of them were 25, 30 years old, the locomotives that we inherited. They had not gone through a 4-year service, 8 years mandatory overhaul. So what we found is as we went to the market in January 2012, the lead times that we were given for spares were something like 52 weeks, 72 weeks, and even going to 100 weeks. So it has been slow coming, but as I speak to you now, if you come to our warehouses and come to our workshop, you'll find the spare parts are completely kitted. So we've been delayed in terms of getting motive power, which was very low. The line, lucky enough, we were able to get the rails a bit early. We finished the Mombasa-Nairobi section, about 73 kilometers of that, and that was to bring it back to the original design speed. So because of that and the lag in getting spare parts, we were rather slow in terms of uptake of cargo. So that's why you notice you'll notice that in traffic terms, our volumes went down. But if you look at passenger services, the only line that we don't run is to Kisumu because of the issues we have in Kisumu with the viaducts that were vandalized. But between Nairobi and Mombasa, we've continued to grow. That is a good growth there. But the most important growth is, you look at the passenger services, commuter services around Nairobi, we've grown from 3 million people per annum to last year we did 7 million people. So there's been a trajectory growth in terms of the passenger services and the commuter services that we've been running.
Right,
so
let's talk about relations with some of your main shareholders, specifically the Kenyan Transport Secretary and the Principal Secretary under him. Both are very, very critical of RVR's operations at their confirmation hearings. So do you have any plans to repair relations with the Kenyan government?
I wouldn't say repair relations, because those repair relations haven't broken down. As far as we are concerned, yes, we've heard what the reports that have come out in the press. We will be hopefully engaging with them soon, just to take them through the kind of investments that we've made. We put in the ground about $90 million US today as I speak to you, which has actually not even come into the public domain. We are consistently and systematically investing, upgrading. So we hope that when we do tell them our side of the story and they come to appreciate the work that we've done and the backlog that we are dealing with, because I don't think it is, and it must be true, that people do not understand, perhaps the government, the public, the customers, and the publics as a whole, they do not understand the magnitude of the backlog in terms of repairs, maintenance that we were dealing with. The backlog was so heavy that, but the good thing is, looking forward, is we've got a grip of it. We know exactly what needs to be done, and we know exactly where we need to go. So I think when we come to really give them these numbers and show them on the ground the investments we've done, I think they will come to start to appreciate exactly where we are coming from and where we are going.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately, Mr. Ndege. Fascinating conversation. I wish we could take it further, but we certainly will at a later forum. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We'll take a short break now. Here's what's coming up next. All right, well, apparently we're not having a break right now. Let's move on to something completely different. The American president has announced a major American program to boost electricity access on the African continent. When speaking to over 1,000 South African students from the same spot where Robert Kennedy delivered his famous Ripple of Hope speech in 1966, Barack Obama said the United States would partner with the private sector in an initiative called Power Africa to bring electricity access to rural areas of Africa. Now, that initiative has secured the support of Tony Elumelu, chairman of Heirs Holdings and one of the continent's richest men, according to Forbes. He is apparently committed $2.5 billion towards that project. Power Africa is a partnership between the United States and the governments of Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, Liberia, Nigeria, and Ethiopia as well.
We are moving beyond the simple provision of assistance, foreign aid, to a new model of partnership between America and Africa, a partnership of equals that focuses on your capacity to solve problems and your capacity to grow. We're going to start by investing $7 billion in U.S. government resources. We're going to partner with the private sector, who themselves have committed more than $9 billion in investment. And in partnership with African nations, we're going to develop new sources of energy.
Let's drill into the numbers a little more with CCTV's Miriam Bemard, who's live in London. Miriam, aside, of course, from the thorny problem of getting capital, what are the other bottlenecks when it comes to investing in Africa's electricity sector?
You know, Rama, there are a lot of factors that pose challenges for investing in Africa's electricity. You know, as you just mentioned, it's not enough to just throw money at the problem. There needs to be funding put aside for building power plants and managing those operations, efficient administration of the power system, and that means investment in transmission and distribution, along with government policy to make sure that people pay realistic prices for the power they consume. Now, the World Bank says about 25 countries in sub-Saharan Africa are facing rolling blackouts, and this, of course, comes despite Africa's own natural resources like fossil fuels and renewable energy sources, and these are not evenly distributed, and that's where the problem is, creating a bit of a windfall profits for some countries and exasperating the crisis in others.
Well, Europe, of course, is due to import some solar-generated electricity from North Africa, to be specific. But will this $7 billion investment by the United States perhaps spur his European allies to do same thing?
Well, you know, experts here in Europe say Europe's solar ambitions out of Africa are actually on hold, dampened by firms involved in the energy initiative. Critics say the program overlooked many of Africa's energy challenges that we're discussing right now, one being that only a small fraction of renewable energy would supply European markets. So European companies are now watching how the U.S. takes on Africa's challenges before agreeing to anything. You know, European investors want to see how the American model basically operates. The U.S. initiative is expected to support countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, and Kenya, just to name a few, to develop electric power generation. Once the program proves to work, it'll set the wheels in motion for more funding, and we'll likely see Europe take a greater role at that stage.
Indeed. Finally, Miriam, we're looking at 6 very different electricity markets here: Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, Liberia, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. Do we know exactly where the American billions are going? Transmission, distribution, regulation, where is the target here?
Well, Rama, U.S. officials have pledged about $1.5 billion in financing and insurance to energy projects, about $5 billion in support of U.S. exports for the development of power projects, $1 billion in African power systems. But what's actually causing concern, Rama, is that only $285 million is put aside for technical assistance. And that means things like adopting government policy, regulation, and reform that would actually attract private sector investment in the long term. Now, in return, though, Power Africa which is what the initiative is called. The U.S. has pledged $9 billion as an initial commitment from private partners involved for more than 8,000 megawatts of new electricity generated. Now, the next step will be for the U.S. government to give clarity on when and how this money will be distributed, likely at the African Energy and Infrastructure Investment Conference next year.
Indeed. We'll have to leave you there for the time being, though. Thank you very much for those insights. That's CCTV's Maren Bemard live over in London. Now, quick run through the markets. Let's see what your money has been doing for you. Some surprising movement on some markets, especially in light of the news coming out of there. Nigeria, for example, the all-share index closing the day in the red by just under 1 percentage points. The all-share index in South Africa rallying back from the losses we saw sometime in June, up 1 1/3. The 20-share index in Nairobi still very much in that grip of that bear, and we've seen for most of June down by 4/10. And of course, the Egyptian market, all the chaos we've seen in Egypt and the protests and the deadline from the army, of course, notwithstanding, up 1.43%. Apparently, foreign buyers seeing quite a few opportunities there to buy into some equities. Will this trend hold? We'll have to wait and see. Checking again 1700 GMT tomorrow. We'll have the latest.